All right, Bulls and Bears, back with another dose. Hope you're doing well. Welcome to the after Thanksgiving report. I hope everyone had a great Thanksgiving holiday. I took the day off. You didn't see me put out a video, so hope everybody had a good one. Remember, a lot of people didn't get the day off. A lot of people had to work. If you're an employee in the medical field, gas stations, lots of different types of retail industries were still open. So not everybody had the day off. Restaurants, a lot of restaurants were open. So be thankful for the people that were working. Maybe you were one of them. If that's you, thank you very much. But welcome back to the channel. We've got the reports of record holiday spending to talk about. We're going to get into that. How can that be with the levels of financial difficulties that people are seeing right now? The cost of living, tens of millions of people missing paychecks over the month of October with the shutdown. Are they getting caught up? What's going on? How can it be record spending? Well, it's a couple very simple things, details to look at that's going to answer that question. Also, record holiday travel. All right, but first, thank you to Elliot in Ontario. Is that Ontario, Canada or California? Either way, thank you for this background. Pretty nice, right? Got the holiday decoration, the bull and the bear. So thank you, Elliot. I'm not sure if you're in Canada or Ontario, California, because it says Ontario, CA. Does it stand for California or Canada? Anyway, hope everybody's doing well. Let's go ahead and get right into it, folks. The holiday spending, another record this year. How can it be? Well, here's a couple things. The quantity or the volume of things or items bought and the number of transactions is going to be less, right? So people are going to be shopping less. But the cost, even though people are going to be doing less shopping overall, a lot of people are just checking out of the holidays altogether. I mean, let me know down in comments if that's you. A lot of people are just checking out and saying, hey, we're just going to do a family time this year, no gifts, because we don't want to put each other in further harm, so to speak, financially. But because things cost more, because prices are higher this year than they were last year, people are going to still spend more total. And also on top of that, you've got the top 10%, which we found out last few months ago. We found out at the end of the last summer, I believe. We found out that the top 10% were spending so much that they accounted for one half of consumer spending, nearly one half. I think it was like 49%. So about half of U.S. consumer spending was because of the top 10%. In other words, to put it in a different term for you, Jeff Bezos goes out and buys another yacht. That's going to add up to consumer spending. Is it that everyone's doing great and fantastic? No, it's the fact that the people that are doing great are doing better than ever. And we're going to talk about this K-shaped economy and how much divergence there is right now between the stock market and U.S. consumers and consumer confidence. It's very, very huge diversion here, folks. Take a look at this here before we move on. All right, well, let's take a look here on what's happening with the economy. Stock market, folks, S&P 500 is in the red. This chart goes all the way back to the year 2000. But we see what started happening, or to an even bigger degree in 2020. It was already happening. You can see there, if you're looking at the screen, you can see where my mouse is. It was already a divide or a separation between consumer confidence and the S&P and 500. S&P 500 2020. What happened since then? Stocks exploded higher, but consumer confidence continued to plunge. And that's just further documentation and further evidence of the separation between the people at the top making the most money and the typical U.S. consumer, right? The average U.S. worker. And we're going to talk about how little these retail workers are making here in a few minutes. We talked about at the beginning how a lot of retailers were open during the holidays, and a lot of people are going to be working overtime over the holidays to try to get enough to make it through the holidays, probably make a little bit extra to buy some gifts, and then everyone's back where they started in January, waiting for tax returns, hopefully a few months after that. But look at this, folks. I mean, what an amazing, and I use the word amazing loosely. I mean, some people may say this is awful, but it's pretty dramatic. I mean, pick your word, to see this separation between the stock market and again, the S&P 500, which has, more stocks than the Dow Jones, which is just the 30 30 stocks here. But yeah, huge separation, folks. Why does this continue to happen? Why does the stock market continue to go up, be it the average person isn't feeling the wealth? They aren't feeling the success. Now, a lot of people may be seeing some wealth accumulated in their retirement account. But here's the thing. You can't take that money out unless you want to pay a big penalty to Uncle Sam. And also, even if you do an emergency withdrawal, you're basically hurting yourself in the future, because then that's less money that you're making. Even if you're in a money market, you pull that money out, you're making less each year because the money you took out on top of the penalty, right? So there's a lot of negatives to that. But even with that, a lot of people are still taking out emergency withdrawals, and that's how they're continuing to kind of scrape by in this economy. But again, if you just look at the numbers, keep in mind a lot of this is propped up by the mega wealthy and the top 10%. And for further documentation and evidence of this, Axios and many other outlets are reporting that charities are seeing less giving this year. Less giving. So charities brace for holiday demand with less giving. In other words, more people are going to need handouts and help from these charities, but less people are going to be giving, because the people that used to give and donate, a lot of them now are pinching pennies because the cost of everything is so much, right? So interesting thing to see, more demand but less giving. How's that going to turn out, right? We saw what happened when the food stopped being given out. A lot of the food banks in October had to turn people away. People that normally were making six figures, some of them even reported having to go to food lines and get some sort of handouts and assistance. And just to read you a clip out of this, as rising prices and the lingering fallout from the nation's longest ever shutdown squeezes Americans' budgets, many are unable to give back this holiday season, and charities are feeling the strain. Why it matters. Some of the largest charitable organizations in the U.S. are trying to stay positive despite rising demand and declining generosity. So the guy with the Santa Claus hat outside the store holding the bell, ding, 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 wanting you to donate and drop some coins in the bucket, he's going to be hearing a lot less coins hitting that bucket this year, the way it looks. All right, back to the topic of people working for the holidays, especially a lot of these retail stores that stay open, and some of them even have extended hours, and you see a lot of them hiring for the holidays, which this year was interesting because we saw a lot of layoffs from even some retailers. When you would have thought they would have been hiring, a lot of them were laying off. Typical retail workers earn $37,000 a year less than needed to afford a typical apartment, right? So how are people getting by? How are they affording life right now? Well, we've talked about it, but let's touch on a few of the bullet points again. A lot of people have to rely on multiple incomes. They also rely on roommates a lot of times. More people now living with their parents, staying at home. We're going to start seeing some pretty interesting things happen. I mean, it's already interesting. I mean, just what's happened every day. We always find interesting news and data. But it's about ready to get a lot more interesting here in 2026, because we have a lot of population shifts happening right now that are going to cause, I think, some pricing changes. And we're already starting to see some of that in the rental markets. If you watch my videos regularly, you know that rents are dropping, and they've been dropping now for many, many months. And it's about ready to get more interesting. I'll just leave it at that. But if you want to stay on top of that, please make sure you're subscribed and check out our future videos, because we'll get into more details in that as time goes on. But I did pull some numbers out of here for you as far as the typical retail worker and how little they make compared to what they need to afford just a basic apartment. They earn $34,000 a year. That's average. That's typical. And that's 52% less than they would need to afford a typical apartment in most of the major cities. Rental affordability has improved slightly recently, just like I was saying. The typical retail worker earned 57% less than they would need during the health crisis moving frenzy. That's when things really started getting crazy, and prices started spiking up there in 2020, if you remember here. The earnings shortfall is the smallest in Cleveland, right? We talk about Ohio a lot, how that's one of the more affordable states to live in, where the typical retail worker earns 33% less than they would need to afford the typical apartment. New York has the largest difference in shortfall at 71%. Wow, how do people in New York even make it? That's insane, folks. So the average is 34 something thousand, but if you look at states like New York, it's even a bigger separation, largely driven by New York City costs. Now I've got a chart pulled up here for you on how much the average U.S. consumer is going to be spending. This is average expected per capita spending on selected U.S. holiday for the different seasons, right? The winter holidays starting November 1st, which is really when the shopping frenzy begins. We've got that making up the bulk of the yearly spending. When you look at just the popular holidays, Halloween, then Valentine's Day is the second most expensive. Easter after that, Father's Day, Mother's Day. Hey, that's not fair. Mothers are getting more than fathers. How is that fair? And then finally you have the winter holidays, which actually greatly eclipses all those other holidays, right? And I would say that the difference between the Father's Day and the Mother's Day is maybe a lot of the fathers are deadbeats, right? And the mothers aren't. So the mothers are getting more gifts and they're getting more things, and they're being thought of more on their special day there compared to the fathers.
Here's what we spent on average every month for the first 6 months of 2025 as a family of 4 living in Massachusetts. I am a weirdo who tracks my spending, like, very anally. So I love being able to look back at these numbers, and this is what I've come up with for the year. Mortgage is $1,750 a month. We usually pay about like $100 or $200 extra towards it. Our health insurance, we spent an average of $1,061 a month. Propane, $300 a month. Electric, $175 a month. Daycare, $2,700 a month. That's 2 kids, full-time for the most part. Some days they didn't go. Like, an arrangement with our sitter where if she needs a day off, like, that's fine. We don't pay for it. Internet, $90 a month. Cell phone, it's $187 for the whole year for my cell phone plan for Mint Mobile, so I don't pay that monthly. The car insurance is $600 for just my car. My husband owns his own business, so that's like a business expense for him. Kids, I spent about like $300 on miscellaneous stuff every month for my kids. So this is diapers, this is swim lessons, which are paid for twice. Groceries, about $650 a month. I shop at Aldi or Walmart primarily. Gas, $116 a month, and that's just for my car. That's a business expense for my husband. Gifts, $110 a month. Pets, $90 a month. Miscellaneous, $200 a month. And restaurants, $40 a month. We like severely cut out going to restaurants over the past like year and a half because we just don't find it worth it anymore. We'd rather spend the extra money on good food that we could cook at home. So that brings our total like monthly cost to $7,582 a month.
Wow, to have a family. This is Massachusetts, folks. It's not the cheapest state, but it certainly isn't the most expensive state. Wow.
No, I've also had some like other random expenses that I didn't include in these numbers because they're kind of like one-off. I bought myself new retainers after 15 plus years. That was $450. We paid for a dental plan for me and my husband through our dentist. We don't have dental insurance, and that's $560 for the year for both of us. We had to get a new grill this year. That was $230. We are spending about $25,000 to $30,000 this year on home renovation projects, which is obviously like not like a regular thing. And then I plan to spend about $20,000 to $30,000 on a down payment for a new to me car. I have $20,000 saved up right now. I'll probably get that car at the end of the year. Let me know in the comments what you think of these numbers, if they're crazy or not. Like, we live in a high cost of living area, but we generally live very much below our means, and like we have a very cheap mortgage compared to everyone else in our area because we bought our house 7 years ago and it was tiny. So let me know what you think in the comments. Here's what we spent.
Bought her house 7 years ago, so there's the key right there, folks. Remember, the prices shot up in 2020, and she would have bought hers in 2018, and much more affordable back then than it is now, obviously, with the bubble getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But she said a couple things. She's got $20,000 saved up. That's nice. So it looks like they're not overspending, even though some of these expenses were sounding pretty outrageous. And the amount she spends on the kids, I mean, that's a common theme right there. If you have kids, you know all about how much it costs to raise a family, especially now. She shops at Aldi and Walmart, which are the nice, cheapest among the cheapest places to shop for groceries. However, I did find a few things at some other stores that were cheaper than the Walmart grocery, which a lot of people think it's cheaper just because it's Walmart. It's not always cheapest. So something to keep in mind there. Do your due diligence. Shop around at some of these discount stores. Grocery outlet, I don't know if she has that in her area. That's a huge one in my area for people shopping looking to save money. And next, I've got some other news to get into, but it still has to do with the economy, the cost of living. And it looks like they're going to be fighting against deflation. Fighting against deflation, right? We've got the Fed out there doing quantitative tightening right now. In other words, they're eliminating assets from their balance sheet. They're selling it off, right? And we've seen what happened. Prices are still going up, still rising. But now they're going to be going back to quantitative easing. Quantitative easing, which means they're going to be buying more assets from the banks. The banks can loan out more money. And we all know what happens when banks loan out more money. Prices go higher because it's easier to borrow money. So it looks like, from what I could see here, that it's going to get a lot easier to borrow money. We've talked about this many times, how they're going to try to keep the bubbles inflated. That way they can make it look like the economy's growing, because the more people can borrow, the more economic growth they can say happen, because more purchases happen, right? So when people borrow money and buy things and get loans and buy things, it's looked at as economic growth. They say, oh, look how much people spent, even though it was mostly borrowed money and loans. Oh, look at this growth. This economic growth is amazing. And then, of course, the politicians can get out there and brag about the economic growth and the economy's great. In the meantime, people are buried under debt. Many people on the hamster wheel, they'll never get off. They'll never pay off the debt. They'll never really own much. And you see this separation with the K-shaped economy, with the rich getting richer, the poor and the middle class continuing to struggle and barely scrape by, if that. All right, so hope everybody liked this report. Hope you're on top of this, and hope you're in the upper side of this K-shaped economy. And maybe you're even in the top 10%. I mean, drop a comment. Let me know what you think about that. By the way, I did see a chart here. To be in the top 10% in California, you have to make like 400,000. And to be in the top 1%, I think it was like 900,000. And it's different in each state. But maybe we'll get into that in one of the future reports here. Let me know what you think about all this. The holiday spending, less volume, a less or lower number of transactions, but more spending because prices are higher. That's what the report says. I mean, that's how I've read it here to multiple different reports. Please let me know down in the comments what you think about all this. Hope everybody's doing well. Happy holiday season. And drop a comment, then we'll see you in the next video. And make sure you're subscribed. Help keep this channel alive. Thank you very much, everybody. Talk to you soon. Bye for now. Peace.